Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan, and I'm here to bring you, as usual, cutting edge news and research with regards to COVID. If you are not interested in COVID, I don't know if what I talk about now will be of value to you. But this information is very, very important. And what I'm talking about today is a paper that's just been published in February, 6th of February. Inducible CD147 upregulation boosts extended SARS-CoV-2 infection, triggering severe COVID-19 independent of ACE2. Quite a mouthful, but listen, let's just simplify this. When you start to understand just how sophisticated this virus is, you will realize why I still keep talking about it. Because if there's anything that you should realize over the past few weeks with the revelations that are coming out, it seems there are a lot of people who are not particularly concerned about your well being. And what that means is that stuff that is strange is occurring. And one of the strange things is this very unusual virus. And what's interesting about this research here is that this research is coming out of China. They're the ones doing this critical bit of research with regards to CD147. Now, just so that you understand, because what I want you to do is that the priority here is that I'm not going to go through the paper in any great detail now because it is quite a mouthful, can't be covered in a short session. I want you to make sure that you register for this presentation coming up on Thursday, next week, Thursday. COVID trapdoor, how your immunity gets depleted by repeated infections. This is serious stuff because one of the things that is happening is that this is still occurring. They have done this in relation to severe COVID 19, but they have hit on something that I've been following now for a few years. We still don't understand why the lymphocyte count gets depleted around COVID 19 infections. We saw it in severe COVID 19, and the reality is it is still occurring. To be frank with you, from a clinical perspective, it is one of the first things I look for if I'm trying to figure out if somebody had a recent COVID infection. I immediately check for lymphopenia. If I see lymphopenia where the lymphocyte count is depleted, it's a strong indication from what I've observed. This is my anecdotal observation that this is going to be relevant. So I'm going to show you just a few short slides to give you an idea as to what we're going to be talking about in this upcoming presentation. First, basics. This is your virus. This is the most remarkable virus we have ever seen. Okay, these spike proteins on the surface, and they have 3 points which they can enter a cell using ACE2. We thought just that. There are about 25 of them on the surface of each virus. This is kind of what it looks like. And the receptor binding domain for ACE2 is located at the top here. But here is what is fascinating about this virus that actually caught our attention very early on. It wasn't just ACE2. Guess what? There are multiple other proteins that bind to this spike protein. Furin, this is where the furin cleavage site is. Neuropilin 1, DC sign, and add to that now CD147. So you can just imagine there are multiple other proteins that bind to this spike protein. I'm going to try and figure out exactly which point it binds to because the implications of this are so significant. Now, I've been talking about this for years, but there hasn't been any clear consensus from the scientific community about really what does that mean. Now, here's an interesting thing from the paper. When you look at ACE2 and you look at what happens with DC sign, this was done in an animal model, but just the same, the importance is still quite relevant. When you look at how many cells have CD147, so this is what it looks like from the paper here. All of these cells here fibroblasts, ciliated cells, monocytes, macrophages, B cells, CD8 cells, CD4 cells, natural killer cells. These are all your lymphocytes here, the beta cells, even neutrophils. This CD147 is very broadly produced on multiple cell lines. And what that means is that the virus can get in them. This is pretty serious stuff because when you look at the implications, and this is what I'll be talking about in this upcoming presentation with regards to this COVID trapdoor, it's literally like, I think the analogy is, imagine having a castle, you're being attacked by the army outside. The main army is going to the front gate, but they also know that there are some trapdoors hidden under the moat that soldiers can enter into your castle and attack from behind. And this is like what this CD147 is. And this is kind of what it would look like. This is one of the images I've already put together for it. Here you have the virus. It's entering, and I'll call this an immune cell, a lymphocyte. Normally, we think it's going to go through in terms of ACE2. This is not exactly how it enters, but it's just the principle that it slips through this trapdoor inside the cell. And this is what we've known about. But there is now CD147, this back door, which allows the virus into the cell. And you know what's fascinating about this? When the virus infects, it actually causes more trapdoors to open. And so more virus can get in. And so it would explain why we have this really profound lymphopenia, destruction of these immune cells that occurs on infection. The implications of that are horrific because people keep on getting reinfected. And you know what's interesting about this research with regards to what the Chinese have done? The Chinese primarily used whole virus vaccines. And this may be part of the reason why they aren't suffering as much with what has happened post-pandemic. I don't know why no one is interested to find out what the outcomes are in China. I guess they don't trust the data. But the point is simple. When you actually reflect carefully on what they did, they ended up with a broad repertoire of immune responses to the whole virus. Conversely, in most of the Western world, they used a spike-related approach. And when you think about this now, and this is part of the reason why I think nobody wants to touch this, is because the technique was to replicate this viral spike protein. Are we therefore to assume that that has the ability to utilize some of these receptors that the virus is able to use? These are the kinds of things I'll be able to talk about a little bit more openly and in more detail when you come to this presentation, COVID Trapdoor. Because once you understand the science and you're then able to extrapolate the science, you can then predict what is likely to be happening. And critically, you can explain why these unusual patterns of infections are occurring. Measles is on the rise, fungal infections are on the rise, shingles, almost every viral infection you can think of, and some bacterial infections are surging. If your immune system is permanently damaged, it's no surprise that this is occurring. As usual with my presentations, I usually not only try and explain what is happening, I usually am trying to find a solution that would help you to understand a bit better and find ways to mitigate this damage. Just remember, I haven't really spoken about the files that have been released recently because I think it just confirmed what I had been saying from the start. And for those people who still can't yet read between the lines, let me warn you that what we're dealing with here, we have never seen before. Let's try and find ways to overcome it. Have a good evening.